Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the ancient world, the forgotten shadows of history, where power wasn't just about armies, but about vision, strategy, and the courage to defy the impossible. Think about it. Mysterious sea peoples sweeping across the Bronze Age Mediterranean like a storm, leaving whole empires trembling. Or the fierce warrior queen Boudica, who came terrifyingly close to rewriting the fate of Rome itself. And then the Nabataeans, brilliant desert engineers who turned barren sand into thriving cities, transforming water into wealth like true alchemists of trade. But before we dive into this incredible journey, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below right now, telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see just how global this community of history lovers really is. And if you're enjoying these deep dives into the past, hit that subscribe button and join the family. Every week we uncover stories of power, mystery, and survival that textbooks barely scratch the surface of, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. So, dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe grab a drink, and let's travel back to an age where power could topple empires, build legends, and sometimes change the course of humanity itself. Sea peoples, ships of chaos. Around 1200 BCE, something extraordinary happened in the Eastern Mediterranean. Not extraordinary in a good way, more like civilization-ending catastrophe extraordinary. Ancient empires that had stood for centuries suddenly collapsed. Cities burned, and trade networks connecting the known world simply vanished. At the center of this Bronze Age apocalypse was a group so mysterious that even today, we can only call them by the name their terrified victims gave them: the Sea Peoples. Picture this: you're a Bronze Age administrator in a wealthy coastal city. Life is good. Your people have mastered metalworking. Your ships carry exotic goods across calm seas, and your gods smile upon your harvests. Then, one morning, you wake up to reports of strange ships on the horizon. Not merchant vessels, warships, unlike anything you've seen before. Within hours, your world is on fire. The Sea Peoples weren't just raiders. They were a confederation of maritime cultures that moved like a storm across the ancient world. Egyptian records describe them as coming from the islands and from the midst of the sea. They traveled not just with warriors, but with entire families, ox carts loaded with possessions, and a determination that suggested they weren't just raiding. They were migrating, conquering, and settling. Their fleet technology was revolutionary for its time. While most Bronze Age ships were built for coastal trading, hugging shorelines and seeking safe harbors, the Sea Peoples had vessels designed for open ocean warfare. These ships were sleek, fast, and equipped with reinforced prows that could ram enemy vessels or beach themselves on hostile shores. Archaeological evidence suggests they used both sails and oars, giving them unprecedented maneuverability in naval combat. But who were they exactly? That's where things get murky. Egyptian inscriptions mention groups called the Peliset, the Cheka, the Shekelesh, and the Denyen, among others. Some scholars believe the Peliset became the Philistines of biblical fame. Others suggest the Shekelesh were related to the Sicilians. The truth is, we're still piecing together fragments to understand cultures that deliberately left no written records of their own. Bronze Age apocalypse. What we do know is their impact was devastating and transformative. The Hittite Empire, one of the great powers of the late Bronze Age, simply vanished. Ugarit, a major trading hub, was burned to the ground and never rebuilt. Cyprus was invaded and resettled. Even mighty Egypt, though it survived, was fundamentally changed by the encounter. The Battle of the Delta, fought around 1175 BCE, represents one of the most crucial naval engagements in ancient history. Pharaoh Rameses III faced the Sea Peoples in the Nile Delta, and Egyptian reliefs show a chaotic scene of ships ramming each other, warriors fighting hand-to-hand on deck, and arrows flying like deadly rain. The Egyptians ultimately prevailed, but at enormous cost. The mystery deepens when we consider their origins. Some theories suggest they were refugees from natural disasters, perhaps earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or climate change that made their original homelands uninhabitable. Others propose they were displaced by the collapse of Mycenaean Greece, or political upheavals in Anatolia. Their ship construction reveals sophisticated understanding of marine engineering. Unlike the heavy ceremonial vessels of pharaohs or merchant ships designed for maximum cargo, Sea Peoples' ships were built for speed, stealth, and combat effectiveness. They featured elevated prows and sterns that could serve as fighting platforms, reinforced hulls that could survive ramming attacks, and shallow drafts. Archaeological sites across the eastern Mediterranean tell fragments of their story. Burned layers in ancient cities often contain distinctive pottery styles, weapon types, and architectural features that mark sea people's presence. At Ashkelon, excavations have revealed evidence of new cooking techniques, different house layouts, and burial practices that arrived suddenly around 1175 BCE. Perhaps most intriguingly, the Sea Peoples seem to have been technological innovators. Ironworking, which would define the next era of human civilization, appears to have spread partly through their networks. Their weapons show advanced metallurgy, and their ships incorporated design elements that wouldn't become common in Mediterranean navies for centuries. The collapse they caused marked the end of the Bronze Age and the beginning of what historians call the Dark Age of the ancient world. For nearly 300 years, literacy declined, trade networks fragmented, and population centers shrank. But from this chaos would eventually emerge new powers. The Greeks, the Phoenicians, the Neo-Assyrians, and ultimately, the classical world we recognize today. Boudica's fury. In 60 CE, Britannia was supposed to be another jewel in Rome's crown. The legions had conquered, the cities had been built, and Roman law was spreading across the misty island like inevitable dawn. Tax collectors were getting comfortable, Roman merchants were getting rich, and the local tribes were learning to accept their new reality. Then a warrior queen named Boudica decided that reality needed some serious revision. Boudica was queen of the Iceni, a Celtic tribe that occupied what is now Norfolk and parts of Suffolk. She wasn't born into war, quite the opposite. Her husband, Prasutagus, had been a client king, one of those local rulers who collaborated with Rome in exchange for maintaining some authority over their people. It was a delicate arrangement that required constant diplomatic balancing, and for years it worked. But when Prasutagus died around 59 CE, the careful equilibrium collapsed. According to his will, he left half his kingdom to Rome and half to his daughters. A compromise he hoped would satisfy both Roman greed and Iceni tradition. Instead, it satisfied no one. Roman officials saw the inheritance as an opportunity for a complete takeover. They declared the will invalid, annexed the entire kingdom, and began treating the Iceni as conquered enemies rather than allies. What happened next was either Roman stupidity or Roman arrogance taken to dangerous extremes. They flogged Boudica publicly, a humiliation designed to break her authority among her people. They sexually assaulted her daughters, an act of violence that violated both Roman and Celtic concepts of honor. They confiscated Iceni lands, reduced free tribesmen to slavery, and demanded immediate payment of massive debts that had never existed under the previous arrangements. The Romans had just created their worst nightmare, a competent enemy with nothing left to lose. The rebellion's fire. Boudica's response was swift and absolute. She didn't just seek revenge, she organized it. Celtic tribes that had been traditional enemies united under her leadership. The Trinovantes, whose lands had been seized for Roman settlements, joined her cause. Warriors from across eastern Britain gathered under her dragon banners, and what had started as a local dispute became a national revolt. Her first target was Camulodunum, modern Colchester, the capital of Roman Britain and a symbol of imperial authority. The city was lightly defended, most of the legions were fighting in Wales, and the colonists had grown complacent. Roman settlers had built their homes on confiscated Celtic lands, erected a massive temple to the divine Claudius, and treated the local population as servants. The attack on Camulodunum wasn't just military conquest, it was ritual purification through violence. Boudica's forces didn't just kill the Roman inhabitants, they tortured them with deliberate, symbolic cruelty. They buried some alive, impaled others, and hung the rest in sacred groves as offerings to Celtic war gods. Archaeological evidence from Colchester shows the extent of the destruction. A thick layer of burned debris, filled with Roman coins, jewelry, and pottery, marks the level where Boudica's revolt occurred. Beneath it, you find evidence of a prosperous Roman city. Above it, nothing for decades. From Camulodunum, Boudica turned south toward Londinium, London, already becoming an important commercial center despite its recent founding. Here, the psychological warfare became even more sophisticated. Rather than attack immediately, she allowed news of Camulodunum's destruction to reach the city first. When Boudica's forces finally arrived, they found a half-empty city ripe for looting. But again, this wasn't just about material gain. The destruction of Londinium was systematic and symbolic. Every building connected to Roman authority was burned. Every statue of Roman gods was defaced or destroyed. Recent excavations in London have revealed the extent of what archaeologists call the Boudican destruction layer, a thick band of ash, burned wood, and melted metal that stretches across the ancient city. Desert masters. While Rome conquered by the sword and Greece dominated through culture, there was another civilization in the ancient world that built power through something far more subtle. They controlled the water. The Nabataeans turned one of Earth's most hostile environments into a commercial superhighway, built cities that seemed to grow from living rock, and created a trading empire so wealthy that kings begged for their favor. The Nabataean kingdom, flourishing from roughly 400 BCE to 106 CE, stretched across what is now Jordan, southern Syria, and parts of Saudi Arabia and Israel. At its heart lay Petra, a city so extraordinary that even today, after centuries of abandonment, visitors struggle to believe human hands could have carved such beauty from solid stone. The key was water, not just finding it, but mastering it completely. The Nabataeans developed the most sophisticated water management system in the ancient world, one that allowed them to support large populations and prosperous cities in regions where rainfall was minimal and rivers non-existent. Their water technology began with collection. Nabataean settlements included elaborate systems of channels, cisterns, and settling tanks that could capture and store every drop of precious rainfall. But they went far beyond simple rainwater harvesting. They discovered underground aquifers using techniques that wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe for centuries. The hydraulic engineering at Petra alone represents one of the great achievements of ancient technology. The city was supplied by a network of channels, tunnels, and reservoirs that brought water from springs dozens of miles away. These channels were carved directly into cliff faces, tunneled through solid rock, and carefully graded to maintain optimal flow rates. But water was just the foundation. The Nabataeans' real genius lay in understanding that geography is destiny, and they happened to control the geographic choke points where the most valuable trade routes of the ancient world had to pass. Frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia, spices from India, silk from China, pearls from the Persian Gulf. All of these luxury goods had to cross Nabataean territory to reach the wealthy markets of the Mediterranean world, Petra's golden age. Rather than simply taxing these trade caravans, the Nabataeans created an entire service economy around them. They provided security for merchants traveling dangerous desert routes, maintained rest stations and supply depots at strategic locations, and offered currency exchange services that allowed traders from different regions to conduct business efficiently. Their trading network extended far beyond their geographic boundaries. Nabataean merchants maintained trading posts in Rome, Alexandria, Gaza, and Damascus. They had commercial relationships with India, China, and Ethiopia. Archaeological evidence of Nabataean pottery has been found as far away as Britain and Denmark. The wealth generated by this commerce was staggering. Roman sources describe Nabataean kings as among the richest rulers of their time. When Pompey's armies first encountered Petra in 63 BCE, they found a city whose temples were decorated with gold, whose citizens wore silk clothing, and whose markets overflowed with luxury goods. This wealth was most famously displayed in Petra's rock-cut architecture. The Nabataeans didn't build their cities, they sculpted them, using techniques that combined influences from Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian architectural traditions. They carved elaborate facades, tombs, temples, and houses directly from the rose-colored sandstone cliffs. The treasury, Al-Khazne, Petra's most famous monument, demonstrates the sophistication of Nabataean craftsmanship. This facade, standing over 130 feet tall, features intricate Hellenistic decorative elements, perfect proportional relationships, and engineering solutions that have allowed it to survive earthquakes and centuries of weathering. The Nabataeans were also master metallurgists and potters. Their distinctive thin-walled pottery, decorated with intricate painted designs, was prized throughout the ancient world. Recent analysis has shown that Nabataean ceramics incorporated advanced techniques including controlled firing temperatures and specialized glazes. Their monetary system was equally sophisticated. While many ancient cultures relied on barter or primitive coinage, the Nabataeans developed a complex financial network that included letters of credit, banking services, and standardized weights and measures. The Scythians, horsemen of the steppes, far from the Mediterranean world, across the vast grasslands of Eurasia, another remarkable civilization, was redefining the nature of power and warfare. The Scythians, nomadic horsemen who dominated the Pontic steppes from roughly 700 to 300 BCE, created an empire without cities, ruled without palaces, and fought without fixed battle lines. These master horsemen controlled territory stretching from the Black Sea to the borders of China, not through occupation, but through mobility, speed, and an intimate understanding of steppe warfare that made them nearly invincible against conventional armies. The Scythians were among the first peoples to fully weaponize the horse. While other civilizations used horses primarily for transportation or ceremonial purposes, the Scythians built their entire culture around mounted warfare. Every Scythian male was essentially a light cavalry trooper, capable of shooting arrows with deadly accuracy while riding at full gallop. Their composite bows were technological marvels, laminated constructions of wood, horn, and sinew that could drive arrows through bronze armor at distances that amazed Greek observers. Combined with their mobility, this gave Scythian armies a tactical advantage that conventional infantry formations couldn't counter. Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, describes Scythian military tactics with mixture of admiration and horror. They refused to engage in conventional battles, instead using hit-and-run tactics that exhausted and demoralized their enemies. When Darius I of Persia invaded Scythian territory in 513 BCE, with what may have been the largest army ever assembled to that point, the Scythians simply retreated deeper into the steppes, destroying everything useful along the way. They turned the vast grasslands into a weapon, forcing the Persian army to chase shadows across hundreds of miles of empty terrain. The Scythians' material culture was equally remarkable. Their metalworking skills produced some of the finest gold artifacts of the ancient world. Intricate animal figures, elaborate horse gear, and weapons decorated with scenes of steppe life. These weren't crude nomadic trinkets, but sophisticated works of art that reveal deep cultural traditions and advanced technical skills. The Etruscans, Italy's forgotten empire. Before Rome dominated the Italian peninsula, another civilization had already built a sophisticated urban culture, mastered advanced metallurgy, and established trade networks that reached across the Mediterranean. The Etruscans, flourishing from roughly 800 to 300 BCE, created a federation of city-states that represented one of the most advanced societies in the ancient world. Yet today, most people have barely heard of them, despite the fact that early Roman culture was heavily influenced by Etruscan innovations in architecture, religion, government, and military organization. The Etruscans occupied the region of central Italy, known as Etruria, modern Tuscany. But their influence extended far beyond these geographic boundaries. Etruscan merchants traded with Greeks, Phoenicians, and Celtic tribes. Their ships carried goods throughout the Western Mediterranean, and their cities became centers of artistic and technological innovation. What set the Etruscans apart was their mastery of metallurgy and engineering. They were among the first peoples in Italy to work iron on a large scale, and their bronze work was considered the finest in the Mediterranean world. Etruscan bronzes, from mirrors and jewelry to large-scale sculptures, displayed technical skill and artistic sophistication that wasn't matched elsewhere for centuries. Their cities featured advanced urban planning, including sophisticated drainage systems, paved streets, and multi-story buildings. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer system, was originally an Etruscan engineering project. Many of the architectural techniques that we associate with Roman engineering, including the arch and vault construction, were actually Etruscan innovations that Romans later adopted and perfected. Etruscan society was remarkably egalitarian for the ancient world, particularly in terms of women's rights. Etruscan women could own property, participate in public life, and enjoy social freedoms that shocked Greek and Roman observers. Their tomb paintings show men and women dining together, attending sporting events, and participating equally in social activities. Religion played a central role in Etruscan life, but their religious practices were distinctive and sophisticated. They developed complex systems of divination, particularly the interpretation of lightning patterns and the examination of sacrificial animal entrails. These practices were so respected that Romans regularly consulted Etruscan priests for important state decisions. The Garamantian Empire, Sahara's hidden kingdom, deep in the heart of the Sahara Desert, where today only scattered oases break the endless expanse of sand, once flourished one of Africa's most sophisticated ancient civilizations. The Garamantians, ruling from roughly 500 BCE to 700 CE, built an empire that controlled trans-Saharan trade routes and developed agricultural techniques that supported large urban populations in one of Earth's most challenging environments. The Garamantian capital, Garama, modern Germa in Libya, was a thriving city of perhaps 20,000 inhabitants located in the Fezzan Basin. This wasn't a small desert outpost, but a major urban center with monumental architecture, specialized craftsmen, and a complex social hierarchy that rivaled contemporary civilizations in the Mediterranean world. What made Garamantian civilization possible was their mastery of water management in arid environments. They developed an extensive system of underground channels called fagaras, similar to the Khanate systems of Persia, that brought water from aquifers in highland areas to support agriculture and urban life in the lowland basins. Recent satellite archaeology has revealed the full extent of the Garamantian irrigation system. Over 600 individual fagaras totaling more than 4,500 kilometers of underground channels. This represents one of the largest ancient irrigation projects anywhere in the world, comparable to the great hydraulic works of Mesopotamia or China. The Garamantians were master horse and chariot warriors, as depicted in thousands of rock art panels scattered across the central Sahara. Their military mobility allowed them to control vast territories and dominate the tribes of the surrounding desert regions. They raided settlements along the southern edges of the Roman Empire and captured slaves who were traded northward along trans-Saharan routes. But the Garamantians were more than just desert raiders. Archaeological evidence reveals a sophisticated urban culture with specialized craft production, monumental stone architecture, and complex burial traditions. Their metalsmiths produced fine jewelry and weapons. Their potters created distinctive ceramics that are found throughout the central Sahara. Trade was central to Garamantian prosperity. They controlled the routes that carried gold, ivory, exotic animals, and slaves from sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean world. In return, they imported manufactured goods, wine, and luxury items from Roman territories. Classical sources describe Garamantian expeditions that traveled thousands of miles across the desert to trade with peoples as far away as the Niger River. The environmental challenges they overcame were enormous. The Sahara during the Garamantian period was already approaching its modern level of aridity. Supporting large settlements required not just water management, but also careful resource conservation and diversified subsistence strategies. In the annals of history, there are civilizations that once shone brightly, but have since faded into obscurity. Today, we're diving into two such forgotten empires, the Kingdom of Axum and the Sogdians. Let's start with Axum, an ancient powerhouse that ruled northern Ethiopia and Eritrea from 100 to 700 CE. This African kingdom stood shoulder to shoulder with the likes of Rome, Persia, and China. Imagine walking through their capital, marveling at colossal stone obelisks stretching 100 feet into the sky. These weren't just monuments, they were statements of power and engineering prowess. Axum's influence extended far beyond its borders. They dominated the Red Sea trade routes, controlling the flow of precious gold and ivory. But perhaps their most significant legacy was spiritual. Under King Ezana, Axum became the first Christian kingdom in Africa, setting the stage for centuries of Ethiopian Christian tradition. The Axumites weren't content with just regional power. They flexed their military muscle by conquering southern Arabia, expanding their reach across the Red Sea. Though the kingdom eventually declined, its legacy lived on through subsequent Ethiopian Christian kingdoms, shaping the region's cultural and religious landscape for centuries to come. Now let's shift our focus to Central Asia and the enigmatic Sogdians. These master merchants from what is now Uzbekistan and Tajikistan were the unsung heroes of the Silk Road from the 4th to 10th centuries. Think of them as the ultimate cultural brokers, polyglot intermediaries who could navigate the complex web of languages and customs spanning from China to the Mediterranean. The Sogdians didn't just facilitate trade, they created thriving commercial hubs in cities like Samarkand and Bukhara. These bustling metropolises became melting pots of ideas, religions, and artistic styles. As goods flowed along the Silk Road, so did beliefs. The Sogdians played a crucial role in spreading major religions across Asia, leaving an indelible mark on the spiritual landscape of the continent. Their influence wasn't limited to commerce and religion. The Sogdians left behind a rich artistic legacy, blending elements from various cultures to create a unique aesthetic that still captivates us today. From intricate textiles to stunning frescoes, Their art tells the story of a people at the crossroads of civilizations. For centuries, the Sogdians shaped the very essence of the Silk Road. But like all great empires, their time eventually came to an end. By the 10th century, changing trade patterns and political shifts led to their decline. Yet their legacy as the masters of the Silk Road lives on, a testament to the power of cultural exchange and the enduring impact of forgotten civilizations. In the annals of ancient history, two civilizations stand out for their remarkable achievements and lasting impact: the Hittites and the Olmecs. These powerful cultures, though separated by vast distances, both left indelible marks on their respective regions and the course of human development. Let's begin our journey in Anatolia, where the Hittites rose to prominence between 1600 and 1200 BCE. As the first great Indo-European state, they quickly established themselves as masters of both iron and diplomacy. The Hittites pioneered large-scale chariot armies and were among the first to harness the power of iron weapons, giving them a significant military edge over their rivals. But it wasn't just their martial prowess that set the Hittites apart. They were equally adept in the art of diplomacy, crafting intricate treaties and engaging in complex negotiations. In fact, the world's first known peace treaty was signed between the Hittites and Egypt, a testament to their diplomatic finesse. At the heart of their empire stood the marvel of Hattusa, the Hittite capital. This impressive city boasted massive stone walls and grand temples, showcasing the architectural and engineering skills of its builders. From this stronghold, the Hittites ruled a vast multi-ethnic empire stretching from Anatolia to Syria. Yet, for all their power and influence, the Hittite civilization met a mysterious end around 1200 BCE, leaving behind tantalizing clues for archaeologists and historians to unravel. Across the ocean, in the lush landscapes of Mesoamerica, another ancient civilization was making its mark. The Olmecs, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, flourished from 1500 to 400 BCE. This foundational civilization laid the groundwork for many later Mesoamerican cultures. The Olmecs were master engineers, constructing impressive cities like San Lorenzo and La Venta. But perhaps their most iconic legacy is the colossal stone heads carved from massive basalt boulders, some weighing up to 40 tons. These enigmatic sculptures continue to captivate our imagination to this day. The Olmecs were also great innovators, developing early writing systems, complex calendars, and the famous Mesoamerican ball game. Their artistic influence, particularly the distinctive jaguar-human hybrid motifs, would echo through the centuries in later Mesoamerican art. The impact of the Olmec civilization cannot be overstated. Their cultural, artistic, and technological advancements would go on to influence the Maya, Aztec, and numerous other Mesoamerican civilizations, shaping the region's history for millennia to come. As we reflect on these two remarkable civilizations, we're reminded of the ingenuity and resilience of our ancient ancestors. The Hittites and Olmecs, each in their own unique way, laid the foundations for the complex societies that would follow, leaving behind legacies that continue to fascinate and inspire us to this day. The Kingdom of Kush, Black Pharaohs of the Nile. When most people think of the pharaohs of Egypt, they imagine pyramids, hieroglyphs, and dynasties stretching back thousands of years. But what many forget is that at one point, the rulers of Egypt came not from the north, but from the south, from the Kingdom of Kush in Nubia, modern Sudan. For centuries, the Kushites had been Egypt's rivals, allies, and trading partners. They mastered the Nile's rhythms, controlled trade routes deep into Africa, and built their own monumental temples and pyramids. Yes, pyramids. In fact, Nubia has more surviving pyramids than Egypt itself. In the 8th century BCE, Kushite kings led by Paye swept north and conquered Egypt, establishing the 25th dynasty, the so-called Black Pharaohs. From their capital at Napata, they ruled both Egypt and Nubia, uniting the Nile Valley under African leadership. Their reign was marked by a revival of traditional Egyptian culture, temple building, religious reform, and grand architecture. But the Kushites also left their own mark, blending Egyptian traditions with Nubian styles in art, clothing, and burial practices. Eventually, Assyrian invasions pushed the Kushites out of Egypt, but their kingdom continued to thrive further south at Meroe. There, they developed their own writing system, advanced ironworking industries, and distinctive pyramid complexes. The Kingdom of Kush lasted for centuries beyond Egypt's decline, a reminder that African civilizations were not just influenced by Egypt, They were central players in shaping Nile Valley history. The Indus Valley civilization, the forgotten cities of South Asia. Around the same time that Mesopotamia and Egypt were flourishing, another great civilization thrived along the Indus River in modern Pakistan and northwest India. The Indus Valley civilization, also called Harappan civilization, existed from about 2600 to 1900 BCE and remains one of history's great enigmas. Unlike Egypt with its pharaohs or Mesopotamia with its kings, the Indus Valley left behind no grand palaces, no obvious temples, and no evidence of powerful rulers. Instead, their cities, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and dozens of others, were marvels of urban planning. Straight streets, standardized brickwork, advanced drainage systems, and public baths suggest a highly organized society with a surprising degree of equality. Their economy was equally advanced. They traded with Mesopotamia, producing finely crafted beads, pottery, and textiles. Seals carved with strange animal motifs like unicorns, elephants, and bulls served as markers of identity and trade goods. But the biggest mystery remains their script. Hundreds of short inscriptions survive, but no one has been able to conclusively decipher them. Without a readable written record, we can only guess at their political systems, religions, or daily lives. Around 1900 BCE, the civilization began to decline, perhaps due to climate change, river shifts, or resource exhaustion. The cities were abandoned, and for centuries the Indus Valley slipped into obscurity. Yet their innovations in sanitation, trade, and city planning show that they were one of the world's earliest urban experiments, one whose secrets remain largely locked away. From the steppes of Central Asia to the highlands of Colombia, two ancient civilizations left an indelible mark on history. The Huns and the Muisca, though separated by vast distances, both captivated the imagination of their contemporaries and continue to fascinate us today. In the 4th century CE, a nomadic confederation known as the Huns burst onto the world stage, striking terror into the hearts of the Roman and Persian empires. These fierce warriors, mounted on small but sturdy horses, wielded deadly composite bows capable of piercing armor at great distances. Their psychological warfare tactics and lightning-fast raids earned them a fearsome reputation. Under the leadership of Attila, the Huns united into a formidable empire stretching from the Black Sea to the borders of Gaul. Extracting tribute from terrified neighbors, Attila earned the ominous title Scourge of God. Yet the origins of these nomadic conquerors remain shrouded in mystery, with no written records of their own and only fragmentary archaeological evidence. Debates continue over their possible connections to the Central Asian Xiongnu. Though Attila's death in 453 CE led to the fracturing of the Hunnic Confederation, their impact on Europe was permanent. The migrations and power shifts they set in motion reshaped the continent for centuries to come. Half a world away in the Colombian Andes, another civilization was flourishing. From the 6th to the 16th centuries, the Muisca Confederation controlled the fertile valleys and plateaus of the highlands. These lords of gold were renowned for their advanced metallurgy, particularly their mastery of the lost wax casting technique. The Muisca economy thrived on extensive trade networks in salt and emeralds, but it was their sacred rituals that captured the imagination of later European explorers. At Lake Guatavita, Muisca rulers would cover themselves in gold dust and dive into the waters as a divine offering, giving rise to the enduring legend of El Dorado. This sophisticated society mastered high-altitude agriculture, crafted valuable textiles, and developed a complex lunar calendar. However, the arrival of Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century spelled doom for the Muisca civilization. Their legendary wealth became a target, and though their culture collapsed, the myth of El Dorado lived on, far outlasting the civilization that inspired it. The legacies of both the Huns and the Muisca continue to captivate us. Whether it's the image of Attila's hordes sweeping across the European steppes, or the glittering rituals of gold-covered chiefs, these ancient peoples remind us of the diverse and fascinating cultures that have shaped our world. Legacy of the Lost Titans. As we reach the end of our journey through these forgotten chapters of history, it's worth reflecting on what connects these diverse stories. Each of these civilizations, the Sea Peoples, Boudica's Britons, the Nabataeans, Scythians, Etruscans, and Garamantians, found different ways to create power and influence in a world dominated by larger, more established forces. The Sea Peoples chose mobility and innovation, becoming masters of naval warfare who reshaped the entire Eastern Mediterranean. Boudica transformed personal tragedy into national resistance, proving that even mighty Rome could be challenged by determined opposition. The Nabataeans built prosperity through environmental mastery and commercial expertise, creating wealth that rivaled military empires. The Scythians demonstrated that political power didn't require cities or fixed territories, only superior military techniques and cultural unity. The Etruscans showed how technological innovation and cultural sophistication could create lasting influence even after political independence was lost. The Garamantians proved that human ingenuity could create thriving civilizations even in the world's most challenging environments. Each of these powers rose and fell according to circumstances often beyond their control. Climate change, technological evolution, and the expansion of larger empires ultimately determined their fates. But their brief moments of dominance left permanent marks on human history, influencing military tactics, urban planning, commercial practices, and cultural traditions. Modern archaeology continues to reveal new details about these lost civilizations, reminding us that our understanding of the past is constantly evolving. Ground-penetrating radar, DNA analysis, and satellite imagery are uncovering evidence that challenges old assumptions and opens new questions about how power operated in the ancient world. These stories remind us that history is not simply a record of inevitable progress toward modernity. The ancient world was filled with remarkable innovations, sophisticated technologies, and complex societies that solved problems in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. As you return to the modern world, remember that many systems we take for granted have ancient roots. The Sea Peoples' maritime innovations influenced naval architecture for centuries. Nabataean water management techniques are still studied by modern engineers. Etruscan architectural innovations laid the foundation for Roman engineering marvels. History's lost titans may have faded from memory, but their influence echoes through time in ways both obvious and subtle. They remind us that power takes many forms. Innovation can emerge from unexpected sources, and even the mightiest civilizations are ultimately temporary. Their stories, recovered from fragments and ruins, continue to teach us about human potential, resilience, and adaptation. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of history's hidden powers. Until next time, remember that every archaeological discovery brings us closer to understanding the full richness of human experience across time. The past is not gone. It lives on in every innovation, institution, and idea that connects us to the remarkable people who came before.